Good afternoon and welcome everyone who's taken the time out to be with us today. My name is Brendan Kavanagh. I'm CEO of Olive Group, and I'm delighted also to welcome our esteemed guests here today. I would particularly like to thank the Minister for Higher and Further Education, Innovation and Science, Simon Harris, to whom I am very grateful for taking the time out of his busy schedule to support us today. As CEO of Olive Group, I'm very proud to announce the official launch of this new online training program called S.H.A.R.E. S.H.A.R.E stands for Sexual Health and Relationship Education and has been created by Elaine Byrnes and Richie Sadlier, who have both devoted a large part of their lives to helping young adults navigate this challenging period in their lives as they develop relationships, both emotionally and physically. Both Richie and Elaine work tirelessly with people around the area of consent, bringing, as they do, their own academic and practical experiences to inject a fresh, no-nonsense approach to this, at times, difficult subject, the subject of consent and sexual behaviours in teenagers. And we are reminded often that the subject of consent is, in itself, an important and pertinent one. Consent goes right to the heart of human behaviour because it deals with boundaries which, at this challenging time of a young person's life, is when people learn how to draw them. And it is for this reason that S.H.A.R.E was created. It has been designed to support young people to have healthy, safe and enjoyable experiences in their personal relationships. The idea for this online training course has been adapted from their popular workshop series that sees them deliver this to young adults in schools around the country. For us at Olive Group, we are privileged to be able to develop a platform that enables Richie and Elaine to bring their incredibly important training to not just a wider audience, but in a manner that they are comfortable with. You know, the digital generation that we like to describe as the screen swipers, scrollers, and touchscreen aficionados, the very same people who use Spotify, Netflix, TikTok, and YouTube daily, because as digital natives, this is how they want to engage with the world and how they learn. But this is only possible by seeking out people like Elaine and Richie, people who have a wealth of knowledge and expertise in their field and are dedicated and generous about sharing it. And although there are other courses with similar content in the pipeline in other institutions, we are delighted to announce that this course is available right now. In fact, you will find the enrollment instructions on our MyConnect platform at the bottom of your screen. The course, as you will see, is easily accessible to everyone. Simple to download and can be taken on a smartphone, tablet or laptop, and most importantly, at your own pace. Indeed, I myself am privileged to have extremely talented and a creative team in Olive Group who excel in their ability to bring enjoyable digital and creative styles to the transformation of classroom learning. It is because of their abilities that I know that this course will be easy to access. It's extremely engaging and will help guide the learners on a fantastic journey of discovery throughout their lives. And now, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to bring on the course creators to tell us more about the content of the course. But before I do, I'd just like to call on our audience to submit any questions for the short Q&A session we have at the end of this presentation. This will give our speakers the opportunity to answer any of your questions. Just click the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen or simply leave a comment on the YouTube page on which you're watching. To our audience, please be aware that you will be on mute during the session, and this session is recorded. So without any further delay, I would like to take the opportunity to introduce our first speaker, co-creator of the S.H.A.R.E program, Elaine Byrnes.
Thank you, Brendan, and a special thanks to everyone who has joined us as we launch the S.H.A.R.E program. Standing here today, I'm taken back to my early days in NUI Galway as co-creator of Smart Consent, now known as Active Consent, and reminded of the reticence as recently as 2015-16 to progress conversations related to sexual behaviour in a way that was positive and empowering. The S.H.A.R.E programme reflects a significant move forward in supporting young people and their sexual health. As part of my PhD research, I interviewed college students and asked about their experience of sexuality education. Unsurprisingly, for most of them, it was lacking. I was most struck by the palpable disappointment in students at their lack of preparation for those crucial first experiences and relationships, primarily relying on information gathering and anecdotes from older siblings, peers, or pornography. And if porn is your educator, what are you learning? It was around this time that Richie and I were introduced and our working partnership began. It reflects over 20 years of combined experience in practice, education, academia, and research. One of the challenges in developing S.H.A.R.E was visualizing how the course that we successfully facilitated in a classroom setting could translate to an online e-learning platform. The answer is very effectively. Nothing was lost, and parts of the course, for example, situational dilemmas and realistic situational dilemmas, came alive with animation. This is a course that students can dip in and out of and learn at their own pace. Although we recommend that it is followed in the order that we've designed, as each module is informed by and builds on the previous. There is the option of a blended learning approach in a school setting, a blend of self-directed online engagement with the MyConnect platform, reinforced by teacher-facilitated classroom activities following each module. I'm going to outline the content for you now very briefly. There are 6 modules. The introductory module gives an outline of the programme, our ethos and approach, with the primary aim of supporting students' personal journey. The programme sets out from this point to be informative, fact-based, objective, and fun. In Module 2, the focus is on how to form and maintain healthy and respectful relationships, from navigating the landscape of social media to understanding how to end relationships in a healthy way. Students also engage with hypothetical dilemmas to help recognize and respond to unhealthy, abusive, or harmful behavior. Module 3, consent. Students engage with explanations of the concept and principles, developing their understanding of how it is effectively communicated. Going beyond the sloganeering that often limits the scope of these discussions, students apply their learning to hypothetical dilemmas again, presented at the end of the module. The depiction of sex and relationships in pornography is the focus of Module 4. While we recognise the appropriateness of adolescent curiosity, we encourage students to critically reflect on some of the more harmful and unhealthy messages implicit in pornography. Without taking a judgmental position on alcohol use, Module 5 outlines how it can impact sexual decision-making and behaviour. Students again engage with hypothetical dilemmas to help apply their learning to real-life scenarios. Finally, Module 6, that while we acknowledge the role of risk-taking in adolescence, we promote the importance of sexual health and the benefit of protecting themselves and partners from unplanned consequences. A range of contraceptive options is presented, supporting students to make informed decisions that are right for them. So after that whistle-stop tour of the programme, I'm going to hand over to Richie, who'll detail the rationale and motivation that brings us to today.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you to Elaine and to Brendan for those words. In just a few moments, I'm going to be welcoming the Minister for Further and Higher Education, Research, Innovation and Science on stage to say some words about the S.H.A.R.E programme and the role it can have in supporting the development of young people in Ireland. It goes without saying, but I'll say it anyway, I'm absolutely thrilled, I really am, that we've reached the point that we're at today. A huge amount of time and effort and expertise has gone into its creation, and I'm really, really excited by the potential impact that the S.H.A.R.E programme can have and by the number of young people it now has the capacity to reach in a really, really positive way. But just to explain the origins of S.H.A.R.E, Elaine has touched on some of it already, and to explain how this all began. Several years ago, having worked with many adolescents in my psychotherapy practice, adolescents that required support on a number of issues around their sexual health, their sexuality, their sexual development, many of whom acknowledged that up until that point the primary educators in this area had been the online porn industry. It became increasingly clear to me, in ways that it has to people who've worked with young people in this area a long, long time ago, that us adults can do more and should do more to provide them with the appropriate support in the appropriate way at the appropriate time. I really don't think anyone can legitimately claim that we do that enough in this country in ways that show we understand and appreciate the landscape in which they move in these days. So once myself and Elaine got together a number of years ago to share our observations, our experience and our vision with one another shortly after this, we had an idea that a more informative, open, inclusive, modern approach to formal sex education would better serve the young people in this country. But of course, you can't often get very far with just an idea without people around you that are prepared to support you and help you develop it. And with that in mind, I want to say a huge thank you to the staff in St. Benilde's College in Kilmacud, my former school, and particularly to former Principal Martin Johnson, former Deputy Principal Oisin McKeown, and the transition year coordinators Sandra Downey, Anne Fitzpatrick and Eve O'Brien. It is really great to be standing here in the presence of a government minister and a CEO of a multinational media company to launch something like this today to an audience of the nation's media. But without the faith and the support that myself and Elaine were given by the staff in St. Benilde's a few years ago, we would not be in this position today. We were able to spend a couple of years in transition year classrooms tweaking, developing and fine-tuning the material for the sexual health module we had created, and we were delivering, all of which forms the content for the S.H.A.R.E programme. And the more we spoke actually about that module in the media, whether it was on podcasts or on radio or writing about it in newspapers, the more the word got out as what we were doing, the more invitations and requests we had from schools, from parents associations, from youth groups, from sports clubs all over the country really, asking us to come and deliver the module to the teenagers in their lives. Our challenge then was to come up with a way that we could reach as far as wide as we could without diminishing the impact of the module. And thankfully that became a real possibility from the moment we sat down and spoke with Brendan Kavanagh, and he explained the experience and the expertise and the know-how that Olive Media has in creating online courses and rolling them out on a national and international level. From that point, an enormous amount of work from a really dedicated and committed group of people over the past 18 months has brought us to the point we are today, where we're able to stand here to launch something that we honestly and genuinely believe will make a really positive impact in the development of any young person that accesses it, and it is available from today. So I'd like to end by saying a huge thank you to Elaine for pouring everything she has into this programme over the last 18 months and our work together over the previous number of years, for Brendan Kavanagh and all the team in Olive Media for their guidance, their expertise and their patience to those of us who take a little bit longer to understand the world of technology, And it is, I'll end now, but it is my real privilege to introduce now the Minister, Simon Harris.
Well, thank you very much, Richie, and I must say I'm really honoured and humbled to be here with you this afternoon and to share a platform with two individuals who have genuinely dedicated so much of your professional lives to assisting, guiding, supporting and crucially empowering young people. And it is my great honour to be here with you today for the formal launch of Sexual Health Awareness and Relationship Education S.H.A.R.E programme. And I wanted to be here today because this is an issue very close to my heart. It's an issue that I endeavoured to prioritise during my time as Minister for Health, and it's an issue that I'm determined that we make progress on now during my time as Minister for Further and Higher Education. Indeed, one of the key moments that I had in the Department of Health was working on the referendum campaign on the 8th Amendment. And indeed, I know Richie did a lot of work on that in terms of talking to men about the importance of the issue. But in reflecting on that referendum campaign, I often think about the fact that a number of issues that we made very firm commitments as a people on were overlooked. So yes, that Citizens' Assembly, and yes, the Oireachtas Committee that looked at the whole issue of the 8th, the big flagship project was constitutional change. But it also made very, very important recommendations about the need to provide and improve sexual education for young people in this country. And it's simply not good enough that we just have the constitutional change, vital and all as that was, and don't actually remember we've made very, very clear commitments in relation to sexual education and also in relation to access to and affordability of contraception in our country. And I think as we look back on the progress we've made as a country in recent years on that whole issue of sexual health, reproductive health, women's health, I think we shouldn't forget the need to finish the journey in terms of the work that we need to do in relation to comprehensive sex education for young people in our country and also addressing issues around contraception. And being quite frank, while I'm proud of a lot of what we've done as a society and indeed as a government and as an Oireachtas, we haven't done nearly enough in this space. So that's why I'm so delighted to have learnt of the S.H.A.R.E programme and so delighted to be here with you today to formally launch it. So sincere thanks to Richie, to Elaine, for all of the efforts you've made in assisting young people in what of course can be a brilliant and wonderful time in anybody's life, but also can be a really difficult phase. It's not always easy being a young adult, and it's a period that's an important rite of passage. It contains many, many milestones in somebody's life. It's a time when people mature, when people seek independence for themselves, and all of that's happening at the same time as they're trying to meet and prepare for physical and emotional challenges that teenagers and young adults confront during that period. And of course, growing up in so-called normal circumstances is never easy in and of itself, but trying to do it all during a global pandemic is even more challenging, because young people in Ireland have now had to live through almost 2 years of a real difficult period of time. They've been asked to live in really unusual and peculiar ways, and during a time where there's been a massive decline in face-to-face socialisation, a really critical part of growing up. They've lost many milestones and legitimate expectations, be it DEBs or graduations or Freshers' Weeks or RAG Weeks, or all those things that are somewhat a rite of passage of being somebody in a secondary school or indeed somebody in a college or a university as well. Relationships and sexuality are key elements of healthy social and personal development, but they're also a particularly important part of the life of an adolescent. This stage of development is marked by the establishment of first relationships, first experience of sexual attraction, and by the experience of falling in of and falling out of love. There's a greater exposure to a bewildering variety of messages about sexuality and the place of sexuality in personal and social life. And sexual development calls for the critical evaluation of the wide range of information, opinions, attitudes and values which our teenagers and young people are bombarded with through their peers, through social media more and more, in traditional media and also in arts and culture. And whilst education is not the only place where these issues need to be examined, our educational institutions do of course play a really important role and should play a really important role in supporting students to develop the skills and the knowledge they need to make informed decisions about their own lives. It's essential that our students are given the right tools to aid their development and an understanding of sexual health awareness and relationships. And just last week, I was delighted to be in Galway with my colleague, the Minister for Justice, where we launched a new online learning hub to provide an integrated, publicly available resource, the first in the country, on sexual consent, awareness and consent learning resources. And indeed, Elaine, that's very much building on an awful lot of the work you would have done when you would have started these programs in NUI Galway. We now have this integrated, publicly available resource. Consent is a serious issue that contains many, many grave repercussions when it's not understood and when it's not respected. But we do not need to tackle such an issue by just sweeping it under the carpet or pretending it doesn't exist or ignoring it. The way we actually address it is to confront the reality of the issue of consent and start a dialogue that brings conversations out into the open. Sadly, conversations we haven't always been that comfortable with or forthcoming with having here in our own country. And at the heart of this partnership with that active consent research team in NUI Galway will be this dedicated website with resources that they've developed for the third level sector, as well as newly designed resources supported by this project, which I hope will complement and assist the rollout of the S.H.A.R.E programme as well. And this initiative is part of a wider whole of government initiative that we intend to take to improve the understanding and the meaning of and the importance of consent in sexual activity. We need to put a real focus on the issue of consent literacy for all members of our society, and this means people feeling confident in their knowledge and their understanding of consent, their communication skills and language with partners, how to access supports themselves or help others to do so, and how we can safely challenge unacceptable aspects of our culture. Despite our ongoing collective efforts, the alarmingly high percentage of students who have experienced sexual harassment and violence is deeply troubling. It's really, really troubling. For example, a recent report by the Consent Initiative at NUI Galway found that 29% of females, 10% of males, and 28% of non-binary students reported non-consensual penetration by incapacitation, force, or threat of force. I mean, these are startling, frightening statistics. Each and every one of these experiences of sexual violence or harassment has a hugely negative impact, of course, on the individual, on a student's well-being, and of course on their academic attainment as well. So we need to take this issue an awful lot more seriously, and that's why I'm delighted to see the S.H.A.R.E programme. And there are key questions that we need to answer as adults, as role models, as mentors, and as educators. Firstly, how do we create the environment for young adults to develop and nurture the social and emotional skills that will enable them to enter adulthood fully informed and with a healthy attitude to relationships and sexual behaviour? Secondly, how can we communicate important lessons on the meaning and importance of consent to young people? And thirdly, how can we ensure they are supported around their own individual choices in life? And one of these ways is obviously through sexual education programmes, which are increasingly recognising the need to equip children, adolescents and young people with the knowledge and the skills necessary to help them make responsible choices and indeed to consume media critically. And what I think is brilliant about this course we're launching today is that it takes real life situations involving relationships, sexual well-being, and the impact of alcohol on sexual behaviour, and it gets people thinking about how they ought to respond within the safety of that learning environment. It's a course that promotes confidence in someone who may be feeling a little unsure. It's a course that shows young people what boundaries are and how they should respect not only one another person's, but perhaps more importantly, their own. And all of it's delivered online at the learner's own pace in a way that works for them and in a space that this generation, quite frankly, understands. It's clear to say that no part of Irish society or no part of global society is untouched by sexual violence and harassment. So we must work together to promote values of dignity, respect and equality if we're to have a bright, safe and more equal future for all. And I really do want to thank the Olive Group. I want to thank Brendan and all the team for making this programme available in this digital format, not least because it makes it as accessible and flexible for young people as is possible. So I really hope, and I know, that the S.H.A.R.E programme is going to provide very valuable information to so many of our young population, so that this generation of young adults can learn those important skills that are going to be critical to their development and their transition into a healthy and respectful adulthood. I think what we're launching today is another really important piece of the jigsaw, a jigsaw that we must complete together as a country, as a society, to make sure that once and for all we have a healthy, holistic, comprehensive, evidence-based understanding of sexual health and sexual education. And I'm really excited about the contribution that the S.H.A.R.E programme is going to make to that. Thank you very much,
Minister. I'll hand over to Ben, who's got some questions, I think.
Thanks, Richie. Minister, I understand that you have other engagements to attend to, so I'll begin with a question for you. Minister, you've previously been quoted as saying, addressing sexual violence is a priority for me and all those in the third level sector. We must be leaders in this field. Isn't a course such as this, then aimed at secondary students, the best place to start addressing this problem?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, a course such as this very much responds to the call that I've issued to the sector, and that's a call to own this issue. Let's not ignore sexual violence, let's not ignore sexual harassment, let's not pretend there isn't an issue. Let's get on top of it once and for all. And through the rollout, for the very first time in the history of our state, of an action plan on sexual harassment and violence for every single university and college in Ireland, one that has to be published and that they need to report against implementation on every year, coupled with consent classes for all first-year students and access to programs like S.H.A.R.E, I think are really three key components that can make a difference. So I see this as a hugely helpful tool in addressing that challenge that I set.
Thank you. One final one, if I may. As you know, there's an Ofsted review underway in this area in the UK. Is there a similar plan in place for Ireland?
There is, if I'm being very honest and frank, which I should be, but sometimes gets me into trouble. I mean, I think we're dragging our feet too much when it comes to reviewing sexual education in our school system. We've been reviewing it for a long time. We need to get on with that, and that needs to be sped up and delivered on, in my view. And I think because what we need our students when they arrive in college to actually arrive with some of the building blocks. So the delivery of that review by the Department of Education, I think, would be our equivalent and a key step.
Sir. Okay, so I've got another question here. This one is for Richie. Richie, how's this course been received by the teenagers who have taken the classroom training programme?
I think one of the things both myself and Elaine were struck by from the moment we were in any classroom at the beginning of any module, and it sustained right throughout, was just the enthusiasm of the youngsters and the teenagers to learn, and their openness and willingness to engage once the stage had been set, that they knew they weren't going to be judged, they weren't going to be shamed, they weren't going to be lectured to or patronised about this area of their life. Teenagers have a real appetite to learn about this topic, and I think they're equally frustrated that they don't get the support that they feel they should. So there's a huge demand for this kind of education all over the country.
Elaine, will teachers and parents benefit from taking this programme too?
I think if it's a school-based programme, if the course is delivered through a school, a teacher will review, I would anticipate in advance, and we also have a facilitator guide that will enhance the learning experience for students. I think for parents it would certainly be very useful to take the course in advance of giving their teenager access to it, because there are concepts maybe that while they'd be familiar with and they'll understand, but just maybe not the language or the language that's current, that we've learned how to use with the teenagers. So it could be very helpful, particularly in opening a dialogue or in facilitating a dialogue between them and their teenager. That'll open up the whole conversation, not that awful birds and bees experience that we all had, but they'll be able to weave it into conversations and weave it into expressing themselves, like their hopes for their children and how they want to engage with the MyConnect programme.
Okay, great. Richie, back to you. What's different about, are young adults really ready for this kind of content?
Are they ready? I think they're screaming out for it, to be honest. Like so many of my own experiences, which I can't share in detail, that I've had in my therapy practice with youngsters who've found themselves in really distressing situations, and without getting into any detail, you're kind of always asked the question, well, what support or education did they have before these experiences? How open and engaged were the adults in their life around providing support or making themselves available to answer questions, to give guidance? And there were so many scenarios I faced in the room where I just felt we wouldn't be here. This youngster wouldn't have gone through what they've gone through had something more appropriate in terms of their education been available to them beforehand. And so many of my colleagues in the world of psychotherapy and teachers that myself and Elaine have spoken to over the years have shared similar kind of stories as well. There's a big appetite for this among youngsters, and there's a big need, as many of the things the Minister said.
Brilliant. Why should we give students this kind of education, Elaine? I mean, surely, what I mean is to expand on that. Surely, like our generation and generations before us, they could figure it out for themselves.
Well, I suppose when we look back at our experience of RSE, not a whole lot has changed really since then. Like the programme of RSE at school at the moment is from 1998. So we would effectively have learned by a process of osmosis, really. And is that really what we want for adolescents today? It's a very, very different landscape. It's a very, very different world. It's a very, very different environment. If we even think of when I was at school, there was no such thing as mobile phones. There was no internet access. There was no, kind of rabbit holes that you could go down online. And that's something I think, not just educating them, but also protecting and preparing them for their future. And giving them, as the Minister has referred to, the importance of giving them the confidence, empowering them to understand boundaries, to understand their own boundaries, to understand other boundaries, to understand consent, to understand what a healthy relationship looks like, to understand what it's like to be a good partner, what they expect from their partners themselves. So absolutely, I think it's essential, and we need to get it right. As the Minister said, we've talked about it for a considerable amount of time, yet we really do need to address it, and that's what S.H.A.R.E is doing, and the launch is going to do today, is address the needs of adolescents in 2021 moving forward.
Super. I have a question here for Brendan. Brendan, what's different about the technology and content that Olive provides?
So I mentioned in the introduction that we refer to them as the screen swipers and scrollers and touchscreen aficionados and all that sort of thing. But the truth is that we need to meet our learners where they're at. We need to provide platforms that facilitate how they learn. I mean, there's tremendous amounts of research done in relation to this type of learning, and the retention rates, go from 15 to 85% according to Forresters, who would be seen as one of the high bars in terms of that research. And these learners are, not going to engage in something that is PDF or, something that is very legacy in terms of how they learn. And Richie referred earlier on to the ability to be able to learn at your own pace, the ability to be able to rewind and see, specific subjects. And in doing that, be able to facilitate discussion with their peers. But I would say for Olive, our goal is we want to be the Netflix of education. So we want it to be that simple. And we want the content to be of a similar standard, that it needs to be high-end, interactive, motion graphics. That sort of explosion of emerging technologies breaks the subject down in like 1 minute of video is something like 1 million words in terms of what you can actually take in with this type of learning. So yeah, I think that's what makes the difference. It's why Olive is, being successful in the transformation of, classroom environments, and as we said earlier on, having sort of experts in the field. Such as Elaine and Richie, being able to interpret, what are the learning outcomes that they would like the learners to go away with, and try and sort of facilitate that in such a way that, it's a platform that they're familiar with, similar to, as we said earlier, Spotify, Facebook, Instagram, whatever. And I think we've successfully managed to achieve that, yeah.
Great. I've got one last question here for Richie. What's the benefit then of an online sexual health program?
It can reach way more people than we could reach personally if we went from school to school. And I think, as has been said before, youngsters can learn it at their own pace. It's totally self-directed. You can revisit certain topics if you want to emphasize what you've learned. And I think there are a lot of teenagers and a lot of adults as well in the same household sometimes that find it difficult to broach these topics. They might think that this is a conversation worth having, but they're not really sure how. They're not sure how to start. So I think directing a teenager to a resource like this, I think bypasses all of that not knowing and that awkwardness around when to bring it up and what's the right time and how much information is too much information and all of that things. And just to finish, to go back to the question Elaine was asked, why not leave them to learn by themselves was essentially the question that was asked a moment ago. The biggest, the most enormous difference in the lives of teenagers today compared to when everyone in this room was a teenager is the availability and accessibility of the online porn industry. And if we didn't instigate conversations with youngsters, and if we didn't, in a very open, available, non-judgmental, common sense way, broach these conversations and help to guide them, there would be no way that they would not know or know that what they're seeing in porn is not the kind of behaviour that they should replicate. So if you're a young girl and you're wanting to know what happens in a bedroom, if we don't have any kind of education for young people, that young girl will look to the porn industry because that's their only indicator. Likewise for all the young lads out there. And I don't think it's right anymore to step back and just kind of have this kind of fingers crossed policy that a lot of people have, and we just hope that everyone gets to the age of 21 without any harmful experiences. We need to do more, and I think this course is one of the things that is really needed to do that.
Perfect. That's great. Okay, so that's it for now. I'd like to end this session by saying thank you for logging on and participating. We really appreciate your support. I'd also like to thank each of our speakers here today, Brendan Kavanagh, Elaine Byrnes and Richie Sadlier, as well as Minister Simon Harris. I hope you all enjoyed everything we've discussed. My thanks to our production team for their hard work in bringing this live stream to you. Please know that you can enrol in the S.H.A.R.E programme by clicking on the link in your web stream, which is on your screens now. That link is olivegroup.io/share. You can also contact us at share@olivegroup.io. Thanks and goodbye.
How can you spot an unhealthy relationship? How do you know which parts of porn are unrealistic? And how do you know for sure if your partner is consenting? Young people ask questions like these all the time. It's time we did more to help them find the answers. Introducing the S.H.A.R.E programme. Supporting the education of young people in this very important area. Richie Sadlier and Elaine Byrnes offer this new online course in sexual health and relationships.
The focus for us with the sexual health module and the thread that's running through it are relationships. So whatever kind of relationships people choose to have with whomever they choose to have them, the thread that we wanted to have running through the sexual health module was that these relationships were respectful, that they were healthy, that they were mutually satisfying, and that they were enjoyable.
This course really addresses the topic of consent in I think a very comprehensive way actually. So we go way beyond the catchy phrases that you might see circulated on social media. We kind of really invite the students to go beyond those initial phrases and to tease out what exactly consent looks like and how is it achieved and how do you approach it in a respectful, ongoing, communicative way.
Developed in collaboration with Olive Group, the S.H.A.R.E programme is a response to the growing need to provide relationship and sexuality education that is objective, fact-based, inclusive and comprehensive. The primary aim of this course is to support and empower young people to have healthy, safe and enjoyable experiences in their personal relationships.
The adolescents are living in a highly sexualised world, so helping them and supporting them to navigate that and to, I suppose, debunk myths for them and to encourage them to use sexuality and regard sexuality in a way that's empowering for them and is positive for them and their development.
Sexual health, like mental health or physical health or your medical health, this is an area where it impacts all students, everyone.
Informed by the academic and professional experience of the course creators, and driven by their passion to support young people, the S.H.A.R.E programme provides a novel approach to support teachers, schools, youth organisations, parents and guardians in delivering relationships and sexuality education. Delivered in a self-paced online format, this course aims to reinforce the messaging of respectful and fulfilling relationships over 6 modules which address important areas such as consent, pornography, alcohol and sexual decision making, and contraception and protection from STIs. For more information about the S.H.A.R.E programme, visit www.olivegroup.io/share or email us at share@olivegroup.io.